Thanks for tuning in with How to Make Money with Hard Money. This is part 2 with Rob Faw. I think there's also like three skills that we talk about a lot that I'd like to hear your opinion on. One, you recently shot a podcast about, which is self-confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think awareness and humility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've mentioned that you got a business coach. That was a recent decision from you in the last 6 months. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you were asking us, does Rob need a business coach? I would have said no. You know, he's our business coach. You know? He's teaching us with the humility, you know, to seek out a coach of your own, to realize there is a next level and be willing to, you know, learn, and then having, I think there's also like self-awareness and self-confidence kind of ties into those, because you have to be aware that you can get better. And then you have to have the humility to actually seek the help.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of our audience can probably relate to that. So maybe we can kind of just talk about those three skill sets around self-confidence, awareness, and humility.
So I think everything begins with self-awareness, right? And having an honest assessment of, I don't love the word weaknesses, but let's say strengths and weaknesses. I might call them blind spots.
Sure.
Maybe some shortcomings, right? So weaknesses, just, I don't like that framework, but, you know. So I would say have that self-awareness. And as we take an honest assessment, I mean, I have like, currently I've got a portfolio of, I don't know, 10 or 15 self-assessments that I've kind of created for people that I work with to just help open up their thinking about themselves. And where am I really? I can tell someone who's an easy grader or a tough grader. Yeah. Some people are a little bit hard on themselves. Some other people are maybe a little bit too easy and
a little generous.
Honest. That's right. So, but that creates a basis for some discussion around, okay, is that really what's going on? It's like, you know, you just kind of go from there, but it's all for the purpose of, you know, creating that self-awareness, because we can't address anything unless we are self-aware. Right. And otherwise,
dealing in reality.
That's right. And, you know, we often hear things like let my ego get in the way of my performance. And, and so people need to just understand, is my ego in the middle of this, whatever it is I'm doing, or is it not? And if it is, then be aware of that. And if it's not, then keep doing what you're doing. And so self-awareness, I would say, is a first kind of a foundational aspect.
Totally agree.
And then go ahead.
No, I was just saying we're doing all these things to have our version of success. Yeah. Right. And our impact on the world. But what's your definition of success for people that, you know, listening today?
Yeah. So I think success is fully utilizing your God-given gifts. Right. And so I love the word gifts. Right. There are many things that we each have developed as talents, but 100% of the time, in my experience and all of my research, ties back to something that we're gifted at. Right. And a gift is something that we've been given. Right. So success is, am I fully utilizing my gifts? I had taken a spiritual gifts test in the past, and one of my gifts is the gift of leadership, and it's the gift of giving. And so, and I look at my life, and it does relate back to those gifts, right? And so, and we all have one or more of those gifts. So I would say, success is, am I fully utilizing my God-given gifts? And if we are, we'll have a very, look, we're in a capitalistic society, right? We have to make money in order to live. Some might say you have to, you know, you can make money with hard money.
Right? That's right.
So,
I know a couple guys.
I know a couple guys. And so, but we have to look, we have financial needs. And so that is a part of the deal. For many of us, we kind of, it can distract us, right? Because we have that pursuit, but then we lose ourselves and our loved ones along the way. Right. So then relationships become less important and more about, because what happens is transactions. So what happens is when we're more about using our gifts and serving, and you mentioned that earlier, Caleb, when we're serving others and we're doing that from a place of utilizing our gifts, the financial resources will flow.
Yeah.
And we'll be blessed beyond, you know, anything that we could possibly imagine, bigger than anything that we might even imagine. And the pursuit of results, if you will, is an admirable pursuit. I like results being a byproduct of a great process.
Yeah, it's flawed in a way because and a lot of people talk about this. If you are, striving for the goal and not enjoying the journey, you'll get to the goal and you'll find out that, you're not as happy as you may have thought you were. And maybe happiness is not the best word, but
well,
joy,
no, I think that's right, and it's why I enjoy the grind of marathon training. Right. I mean, it's a grind.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned earlier about having an executive performance coach, which I do, and she's run 10 marathons. She qualified for Boston 10 times.
Wow.
Now that's someone I can learn from.
Yeah.
Now I can learn from her on many different levels,
Sure.
and so I can relate to her, and she can relate to me in that regard. It's not like I'm going to be speaking with someone who says, well, Rob, you're running 2 marathons. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And so she says, I'm the most disciplined person she's ever met. And I said, okay, I'm going to introduce you to some people because you need to know more people. I'm not sure I'm the most disciplined person that you've met. But anyway, she says that about me. And so I know I have those attributes. But I would say that back to your question is, okay, self-awareness. And then let's just talk about performance, right? So if we have self-awareness and we develop mastery, right, then we're going to perform well. So it's all about just getting better every day.
Yeah.
And being in that game. And we're in the game of getting better every day. We're going to develop mastery. We're going to perform well. Okay. We're going to get great results.
Yeah.
We're going to be happy.
Yeah. It's so much about framework, right? We talk about this all the time, but it really is, because I know I'm asking, where does humility fall and self-confidence fall in that formula? And it's like, well, kind of back to where's your purpose? If you're very clear on your purpose, if your purpose is to make money, you might find out that it's not going to fulfill you in the same way versus serving others or trying to build a business that you enjoy being around and team and helping others, So I think that's more of the pursuit. And so when you operate from that framework, then of course you need to be humble, of course you need to have self-awareness, and if you develop mastery, self-confidence will come from that as well.
Yeah. And we talk about a lot of these things, and you spoke about faith a lot. Is that how you've, kind of adapted and created your thoughts, is through faith? Or how have you used your faith to impact, how you affect your students and everyone else? Your purpose.
Yeah.
Right. So years ago, this buddy that I mentioned, Alan, who I ran my first marathon with, right, he had a mantra, and it was related to a company that we were both working with at the time. And it was called A Balanced Life Based on Faith, Family, Fitness, Finance. And then he added friendships: faith, family, fitness, finance, and friendships.
The 5 F's.
The 5 F's, which I never want to do at my PhD. So the 5 F's. So, but I love that. I can remember it. Okay. B, and for me, faith is right at the center. Okay. Because, and if we're out of balance in any one of those areas, right, it'll show up as an out of balance condition in another area. Yep. So if we ever think about times where we've had relationship issues, we are probably a little bit unbalanced in another area. Okay. So we talk about fitness. Okay. So yeah, if you run 7 marathons in 7 weeks and maybe you push yourself a little more than you should, and then you get a deep vein thrombosis. Okay, maybe I was a little bit out of balance. Okay, and it showed up in other areas. And so, so I would say that humility does come from. I ask people with respect, if they believe that they're the center of the universe.
Yeah.
Some people say yes. That question.
We talk about that.
No, but that's right. Am I the center of the universe? And you live long enough. Look, as entrepreneurs, have we made money? Have we lost money? I mean, I can think of times where it's like, what about all of these businesses during COVID that got shut down in some of these states that didn't have a business-friendly environment? And all of a sudden, they literally lost everything.
Right.
Okay. They lost money. Okay. Does that mean they've lost their identity? Does that mean they've lost their self-worth? And so the humility that just comes from, okay, like I'm good, but I'm not really that good.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm very mindful of that. Like and we kid about that. I'm better in some and I'm less in others. And I really believe that. Right. So, and I've got a long way to go. And so, and that's all from the humility of understanding who I am. I remember after church one time, a buddy of mine, John, he was on my board of directors of a software company over in England. And he'd come back, he said, Rob, he said, I just came to an understanding that I love God more than I love my wife. And then I said, John, I know Jane and she's thrilled. Right? And so just this understanding of who I am, and as Joel Osteen, maybe a name that you're familiar with, would say, and whose I am.
Yeah.
So when we understand that, of course, we're going to be humble. It's by the grace of God, we're even having this discussion.
Right.
Right. And oh, by the way, write a book on a 6,000 year history. Okay. That over 144 generations. Do any of us think that our ancestors just popped up 5 generations ago?
No.
Yeah.
We can all
point.
take our ancestry back at least 6,000 years of recorded history.
Mhm.
And depending on whether you believe in creationism or evolution, it goes back a really long time, right?
Right.
Hundreds of thousands of millions of years. I don't know that I relate to a single cell amoeba, right? But I understand.
Perhaps Adam.
Yeah, that's Adam.
Yeah.
That's right. But I can relate to Adam, right? And so I told a story recently and said, he lived to be 120, but then, actually we were designed to live longer than that, but then God got kind of upset with Adam and his generation. So now we're at 120 as opposed to 800 or 900 years, right?
Yeah.
Although some of the breakthroughs in science
I was
says that
gonna
it may be longer than that. 120 mark that we've been talking about. So I'm very open to changing my mindset on that.
I was going to say we might have to push it to 150 at this point now.
Anyway, so yeah, no, I
I
think
wanted to ask you, what are some of the initiatives and things you have going on in your life now, or some of the targets you have and goals you have set for the future?
so. I have a rolling list relating to my purpose and my priorities of 10 things that I focus on. 2 of them never change, and it has to do with people that I am fortunate enough to want to work with, where we have shared values and beliefs. And so I have a number of groups that fit that criteria. So that'll never change every year. And then certainly related to my studies, things like that. And the other thing that I do, I have 3 groups that I am interested in supporting in some of their missionary work. And so just think of that as being helping other people, right? And some of it's outside the United States, some of it's inside the United States. One of them is a group, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so they do a lot of good work in terms of helping young athletes, right? Create opportunities for them to play and also learn, about their faith and their journey. We're all on some journey. So wherever we are is wherever we are. And so I'm very attracted to help that organization. Some things I'm doing there. There's another organization here, a local high school. It happens to be a Christian high school, and I'm kind of the curriculum guy for the entrepreneurial leadership program. And so I'm the content guy that sets it up on a Monday.
It's a great program.
Yeah.
great
So
camp.
it's been I think I'm in my 6th year. I think the program's been going on for 8 years.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And so it's great.
I wish
And,
we had a program like that growing up.
Okay.
It really is.
these young kids, they're just great.
Incredible.
And they're so innocent in many respects. They don't know what they don't know. They think of entrepreneurial leadership as like, how am I going to make a lot of money? And they come to realize that it's a lot more than that, right?
Yeah.
So we lay in some of those foundational things. And then I have another group that I work with, and I probably could be doing even more with them. And they basically fight for the fatherless, organization called Man Up and Go.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of single parent families. And it's tough for these kids growing up in our country and around the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so they do a lot to kind of fight for the fatherless, if you will. So I think as men, we have a special responsibility to our families. And I think men have abdicated their responsibilities if you just look at the statistics, right, in our country.
Yeah.
And so, those are 3 organizations that I am very mindful of helping and supporting in ways that I can that might be helpful for them.
Yes, or continuing the pursuit of serving.
There you go.
Also, I wanted to, for our audience, I think, you've been such a resource for us, helping us grow the
Tremendous.
company and being a colleague, a friend, a mentor, or a coach, all of the above. And I'm a big believer. I tell a lot of people that they should have somebody like this in their life. And it can only help, in my opinion. How can somebody who's listening today, like an entrepreneur, where can they find a resource like this, and how should they go about trying to find a mentor or a coach?
Well, I came across a discussion here recently with one of my family members, Katie, who was actually a guest speaker over at the local high school. And she talked about having a personal board of directors. So I think I would start there. Okay. So even before I thought about having a coach, I would think about, okay, who are the men and women in my life that I could think of as my personal board of directors? We all have them more or less, but we may not even think of them in that way.
Yeah.
Often it's a family member. It could be an aunt or an uncle. It could be someone that you know. most mentors, okay, when asked if someone is serious about looking for mentorship, will help.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a matter of, do I really want help and will I really lean into it? My son Joey, who you both know,
Yeah.
talks about a friend of his who is a very accomplished executive in his own right. And someone was saying, "Oh, I'd like to learn from you." He said, "That's no problem." He said, "I can meet you at the gym at 4:30 tomorrow morning."
Yeah. I love that.
And so how many going to actually show up at 4:30 the next morning? Or if you don't want to do that, we could do it at 10 o'clock after I've, bum.
Yeah.
So do you really want a mentor? Do you really want a coach?
Right.
So first I would start with have your personal board of directors and then start networking.
Yeah.
Ask people, hey, who do you know? Where should I begin? For me, it's often people who know somebody who might say, hey, you might want to have a discussion with Rob.
Referral networks. Yeah.
There are, the American Association of Christian Counselors has a coaching arm, and I'm a
Great
member of that.
resource.
And then there's other organizations that you can, check out their websites. And I don't love the idea of looking for someone that you may not know. I think it's always
Right.
better to
Yeah.
someone that you might know or someone that might be referred to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
The three of us are mentored and coached by Tony Robbins every time he does a podcast. He
Yeah.
knows that.
Yeah.
He knows that when he's out there, he is indirectly coaching others who are interested in what he has to say. So listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay. And once you're in the
Okay.
game of, no, I'm really looking for someone who can help me take my game to the next level, help me be my best. And so, yeah, I think that's how I would start. Personal board of directors, then start listening to podcasts for people who are actually doing, you could listen to my podcast, The School of Empowerment. You could listen to Tony Robbins' podcast. The Mindset Mentor podcast is a good one.
Yep.
The High Performance podcast by Cinder Kamphoff. That's a great one.
Yep.
So listen to these podcasts. You can indirectly get coaching from them. And then it's like everything else. Once you're in the game,
The rest happens.
it'll happen. Right.
Love it. Yeah. It's a great answer. It's a
Yeah.
great answer. Caleb, maybe I can ask you too, as somebody who's been, newer, 3 years now having a coach in your life. What are some of the impacts it's had?
The impact's a lot. I've seen the growth of who I am just in every aspect of life. As a father, I would say it's affected me. I would say as a partner. I would say as a family member to my immediate family and friends. I would say, and even in business, it's affected every aspect of my life because I'm focused and I understand the meaning of what it is and the privilege of my position in everyone's life.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing
That's
that
great.
has really changed my thought pattern. And now I can accomplish things faster because I'm aware. I can accomplish things with more accuracy and be, hit my targets very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and really too, with all of that combined, it's affected my finances. And in turn with my finances, it's allowed me to serve my people better because now instead of it being about me, I can give my resources to others. So now all these thoughts and all this education that I'm absorbing, it's now falling to the people next to me.
Mm-hmm.
So now
I love that.
I'm in this space of growth and giving and serving all at the same time that I didn't even know existed the way that I did before. Because before my focus went, before you met me I was an individual guy just learning how to earn and constantly was all about earning. So now that I've had you as a coach and I've had David as a partner, I've been able to affect my network better. And I can't imagine too the education people have gotten from me and how it's affected them. So it's just, yet again, goes back to serving. And
I love
what I'd
that.
say.
And I can affirm as your partner and somebody who spends a lot of time with you.
Sorry about that. It's probably a lot for anybody.
But that the amount of times you talk about or think about making money is zero.
Mhm.
It's zero.
Right.
You don't, we talk about building the business, trying to provide better products for our borrowers, trying to provide a better experience for our team, how to
Right.
motivate and improve people's lives in our organization.
Right.
These are the things we talk about, and these are the things that we focus on. And yes, we focus on closing transactions, but maybe that it could sound like you're in a transaction mode, but the amount of time that you are sitting here or myself counting dollars, it's zero. It's
Right.
zero.
It is.
And the money really is, Joe literally said it on one of our earlier podcasts, was that the money is the derivative of the work that you put in. And it has, so it's not the outcome that you're seeking. And so I can just affirm that for the audience.
No, Definitely.
I think we all talked recently about this notion of living your life as if everything were aligned in your favor.
Yeah.
Live your life as if everything were aligned in your favor. And depending on where you are in your faith walk, that certainly we can resonate with that. We might describe God as that. Others could be, just being a good person, and so that's okay. But I kind of liken it to, it's kind of like grade school and graduate school. Okay, so it's one thing to be a good person; it's another thing to be doing it selflessly.
Yeah.
Right, and helping other people. And it's just a matter of, loving and caring. Have you ever noticed in family gatherings that the kids kind of are attracted to certain aunts and uncles?
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like, why? Because they're down on the floor.
Yeah.
Right? They're playing with them. They're meeting them at their level.
Right.
They're just loving on them. Right?
Right.
And so kids know you can't fake, love with kids. And so I'd say that when we bring that to our business, it's a wonderful thing. If you're on the receiving end of that as a customer of DKC Lending or any other business, you know that this person, this company cares about me, right? They may not be giving me the answer I want,
right,
but they care about me. So I love that. And so I think the humility of being open to coaching and then taking it and running with it. And for me, you're there when you feel like you're out of control, because it's like, okay, I'm running with it.
Take the wheel. Awesome. Well, I think now with maybe 10 minutes or so left today, maybe we can run through a couple rapid fire questions and maybe run through any other questions that you might have had, Caleb.
No, you could take the lead with the first one, but I had nothing really truly in mind.
Okay, cool. So, I know there are a couple practical things that we've talked about in private in our coaching. A lot of them are around framework and mentality, and one of them that's a favor for me that I bring a lot back to is people, process, resource. We talk about that all the time, right? For the audience, it's typically when we're facing an issue or a conflict, some sort of problem in the business or in your personal life. You're trying to identify where's the root cause of this issue. And, the three buckets that you have coached us to think about or frame into are people, process, and resource.
Right.
And often, I could give a million examples, but it's pretty much always one of those three things. And when you think it's not, if you can reframe and really dig deep to where the problem is, it really does come back to those three.
I love that. And, often is the case. And we often see these issues coming out from in moments of conflict.
Yeah.
And so many of us will conflate the people issue with a process issue. It's like, oh, well, Johnny or Sally, said this. Well, that might have been a pretty inelegant way of saying it. It might have been that my software program didn't produce the results for John or Sally to do whatever he or she needed to do. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it can sometimes be confusing where we say, hey, we've got this issue, so that's, somebody's fault. Well, we may have this issue because we have a process issue, or we have a workflow issue.
Yeah.
And it is often that's the case, I have found.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have situations where people just, for whatever reason, aren't a good fit.
Right.
And so I think that's true. And then sometimes we have issues. I work with, people in certain situations where literally they've got 4 different jobs that they're doing. Okay. And they're not performing at a high level in each of those jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, well, I'm not so sure that this person is capable of doing this. I'm thinking, well,
could be a capacity.
Of course not.
Yeah.
There's only one person who probably could do that, and he's not living here on Earth.
Yeah.
And
he walks on water.
That's right. Yeah. And so, I think I think it does get conflated. I think it's a very healthy way for entrepreneurs and for leaders to just kind of step back in terms of problem identification. Am I trying to solve a people problem, a resource problem, or a process problem? And if I can know what problem I'm trying to resolve, then I can say, okay, I don't have the resources, so now I'm going to address this. Okay, change my expectation.
Yep.
So I might want one thing, but if I'm not putting the resources, most businesses who struggle are resources that are undercapitalized.
Yep.
And we kind of determine, well, this is somebody's leadership or somebody's process. Well, it's not that at all. It's an undercapitalized business. So I love that as well. And so I think it's a good framework to help us understand what problem we're working on.
I think a lot of times specifically for us, it was like, is it people really is typically the last one to fall on, because you look at the process and for a growing and scaling business like we are, it was often process and resource first. And it takes a lot of emotion out of things too, because when you're in conflict, there's typically emotion involved.
There is.
And so when you can reframe into people, process, resource, and then you realize that, this person's not doing it because they're a bad person, because you know them, you trust them, you love them.
Right.
It's actually a process failure here. How can we manipulate the process? And then when you're scaling and growing, typically you will lack resources, like you said.
Right.
And then if you lack the resource, well, you can't just create the resource out of nowhere typically.
Right.
So then it's a reframe of expectations, or what can we do differently on the process side?
Right.
And then the last resort is, if you feel like you have the resource, you have the process, and then there's still a conflict or a failure, then you can start to evaluate the people.
And the people issue, if you will, in those moments of conflict could be a training issue.
Yep.
It could be that we put someone in a position really that they weren't properly prepared for.
Yep.
It could be a lot of different reasons.
Yep.
And so a lot of it has to do with in teams, do we have the right person in the right position?
Love
And
that.
if we do, then okay, we may have issues, but we've got different kinds of issues. They're probably issues that we can actually resolve, as opposed to, it's very difficult to motivate someone who's unmotivated.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. It's this notion of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation.
Yep.
And look, all of us are motivated more or less by things that happen around us.
Right.
But I like working with people who are driven and self-motivated, because they may not be perfect, but they want to get better every single day.
Love
Yeah,
that.
I found that, human nature, a lot of times people wait till the problem's right in front of their face before they do something about it.
Yeah.
How could you instruct people to identify things before they actually truly take place? Because I know in my life, sometimes I've realized certain problems. I'm like, man, I knew that was coming. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do
Wait for
that?
it to blow up.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden I'm faced with this master problem that I don't even know how to handle. But
Yeah.
how do people really, identify these items, or how they can be more proactive in their lives to really face things a little earlier before it's...
Yeah, I love that, Caleb. And I would say it all begins with focusing on ourselves to have more capacity, be able to step back and work on our business, our life, our business, as opposed to working in our business, right? So if we have perspective, we're going to see things more clearly. If I've got my head down and I'm running, I've done this before where I'm training. I'm literally running on a sidewalk, and I'll run into somebody because I'm so focused on what I'm doing, and like 5 steps ahead of me, right?
Yeah.
And I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I was about ready to run into you. And so, I get a little bit of grace for that, normally at 4:30 in the morning, because they're only, crazy people running at 4:30 in the morning. But anyway, so
like all of us this morning.
like all of us this morning.
Yeah.
So, but I would say, be mindful. If we're so ingrained in what we're doing, it's difficult to have perspective. So that's why it's important for us to continue to grow and develop and get better, because we can step back and have a perspective, right? I'm just looking at things differently, because it's almost like I'm outside of my own self.
Right.
And so it just takes a level of experience and maturity. But I would say it also just has to do with, being mindful of certain situations, listening. How many times have we had a discussion with someone and that the conversation is literally going nowhere? Okay. And the reason is because nobody's listening to each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. How many times have we had a conversation where somebody's thinking about their response to what you said, as opposed to considering? I was listening to the Tony Robbins this morning speaking on the Moonshot podcast, which we spoke about.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, that very same thing, that people just aren't listening to each other. They're so divisive. People are just arguing with each other, and they can't even be open to the possibility that there could be a different point of view.
Yeah.
So what's happened is our emotions get hijacked, and we've talked about this. It's hard to have an argument with somebody who's not going to argue with you. So the way that I like to do that is like, okay, lower the temperature, kind of step back, and out of respect and love, right? And then now we can have a discussion about, oh, well, yeah, of course I should have done this, or I should have done that.
Yeah, that's a good segue to a skill set that we're heavy on right now in the phase of business we're in when we're growing, is to buy back time, right? So because when you're in the transactions and you're in the thick of it, your head is down, like you're saying, it's hard to step back and create perspective. And a great tool that we're using right now, or at least a framework to operate within, is buy back time.
Right.
That allows you to step back, see the perspective, and start to make different moves. And I'll even throw in the 10x is better than 2x philosophy here, because they relate, where, typically 80% of typically 20% of your efforts are producing 80% of your gross revenue.
Yeah.
So if you can, refocus or reframe to focus on the 20% and not the 80%, you can create better results. And you often can't do that unless you could buy back time.
Yeah.
And so we're right now looking at the things in our life and in our business where, is there a who instead of a what? Who can do this task instead of what? And that will allow you to try to reallocate resources to buy back time, so you can pick your head up and then strategize from there.
No, I love that. And even starting with the 10x is easier than 2x. Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I mean, it's a great mindset, right? Actually, my next podcast is going to be 10x Your Life. 10x Your Life. So that's going to be on the next one coming up in November. But so this notion of buying back your time, this notion of stepping back, okay, what are the things that matter the most? The 20% that yield the 80% of the results, which, as you know, the Pareto's law, that's a math law, if you will. And so, yeah, and oh, by the way, go back to the example of what we spoke about earlier. The turtle didn't get on the fence post by himself.
Right.
Okay. No, I chuckle. And I've gotten to the point where I chuckle when I hear people, oh, self-made person, self-made man, self-made woman. No way.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody is self-made.
Right.
Okay. I hear examples. Oh, this iconic so-and-so is self-made millionaire. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that person got to that place without help along the way.
Yeah.
Right. At the very least, give some credit to your birth mother.
Yeah.
Right. So you had some help along the way, right? So nobody's a self-made anything, in my experience. And so I think that mindset is, are there other people on the team who can do something better than we can do?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You got to put your ego off to the side. Like, I'm good at this and I'm not as good at that.
Right.
And oh, by the way, they may be great at that. I'm blessed to have an executive assistant who's just like really good at the things that she is really good at.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a nice compliment to my business. And the first time I met her, it's like, what can I do to help you extend, your message to the masses? And so I just thought to myself, that's a beautiful perspective. And so, yeah.
I love that. And not everybody has to own a business or be an entrepreneur to 10x their life. Everybody has a 2x that they can 10x. And it's really about the reframe, right? And where if you think that you can double down on something, it typically stresses the system or stresses your body or yourself, where I did this much and now I have to double it.
Right.
Well, I thought I worked really hard to get that much, So when you reframe and you think, well, if I had 10x it, you actually have to do something different.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And I love that. And so it's very powerful.
It is.
It's a very powerful thought, very empowering thought.
It is.
Yeah.
Because working harder, it's like, we work pretty hard.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, okay, growth. Like, if I want to double my business, and then
I'm going to have no life.
I'm going to have no life whatsoever. So I love my family, but it's like, that's not going to last very long if I, try to do that. So yeah, we do things differently. So some of that often comes with maturity. Sometimes it comes with experience, not always. But a lot of it just starts with the basic humility of saying, hey, like delegation is a topic that most entrepreneurs really somewhere in their life struggle with.
Yeah.
Right. It's like giving what they might think is giving things away.
Oh yeah. We can all relate to that.
We can all relate to it.
Definitely.
And most of us don't really delegate well until we realize that we can't do it all. Well, guess what? We never could have done it all.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that was known years ago. It was a matter of, when does it click for us to realize that there are other people? But when we do that, it's the power of teams is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the power of more. As my life would say, the power of one more.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So the power of one more. So I think, teams, nobody ever got to any place worthwhile without a team. So I think that notion of buying back your time.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
yeah, it's a beautiful concept.
Yeah. I think that's a really good spot for us today. Do you have something else you wanted to
Yeah,
add?
I wanted to ask you, because with social media and the way life is kind of designed, everyone's been not everyone, I shouldn't use that word, but most people get isolated, and there's a lot of people in fear in this isolation, and they can't get themselves vulnerable enough to expose themselves to new experiences. What advice would you give to people that have the desire for more, but they're just in fear of just being vulnerable to the public?
Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about fear. Okay. And so we're people. And so we were designed to have a certain level of fear in order to survive. So those fears, and we've all talked about this, those fears only exist in our head, right? They actually aren't real. In fact, the studies say that 90% of what we're afraid of never actually come about
That's true.
happening.
Mhm.
So, okay, so I'm going to be fearful about something that actually is not going to happen. But now when I'm stuck, it's very difficult to, have that perspective. I understand that. So I would say take one step. It's kind of like I work with a number of people who have addiction problems. And so it's like a 12-step program. Take that first step. Just get out of your house. Just talk to someone.
Yeah.
Go down to a Starbucks and just be around people. I mean, there have been times where I will work at a Starbucks just to have people around me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not isolated.
Yeah.
Not as much now, but
we're social
at different times
creatures.
of my career. That's right. We're social creatures. So I would say for people who find themselves being stuck, it does take a certain amount of courage, but just kind of reach out to one person. Hey, would it be okay if we just had a talk about whatever?
Yeah.
And that one person becomes a second person. A second person becomes a third person. And all of a sudden I start building up a little confidence. And I realize my self-worth is not related to what somebody says on social media, but it's maybe a little bit to do with my relationship. And even more importantly, what do I believe in myself? Who do I identify myself as?
Yep.
And so, I would say the way to break out of that bindedness that can occur when it's a difficult thing to do, but take that first step.
That's really
what I
good.
do.
All right. I did promise I'd have one last question for you. I know we're a little bit over the time, but
Right.
I'm going to steal this question from the School of Greatness.
All right.
So it's
Well, that's the podcast that shows up right after mine on the
right
subject.
after.
That's right.
not nearly as good.
Well, that's not true, but I thank you for that.
So what does he always ask? He asks, if you were going to die tomorrow and all of your work was wiped away, everything that you have ever written, all your books, your philosophies, all your coaching, it's all gone, but you could leave the world with one message. What would that message be?
So the message would be we're all connected, right? So going back to the Atom Connection book that I wrote, that had a real effect on me in the way that I think about things, where we're having our discussion, but I'm talking to family members, not anecdotally, but literally we're connected. Yeah. We each have a common grandparent somewhere in our past. Mm-hmm. So when I experience everyone as a family member, like families are like not the easiest thing in the world, right? We have differences, we're right, and so that can happen, and so, but that's okay. We're family. So I would say be open to the idea that we're all connected. And that does relate to faith, right?
Sure.
I'm unaware of any other book that can connect all of humanity back to a single individual. And so in the absence of that, I kind of say, that's pretty pragmatic perspective. That's recorded history. And so we're all connected. And I remember having a discussion with a pastor friend of mine that it's like, oh my gosh, I've just discovered. And I can take my family history back through that genealogy, which is really interesting.
Fair.
So you love people in a different way, right? Because you connect with them in a different level.
Yeah.
I wrote in my book that there have been over just about 100 billion people that have lived and died since the beginning of recorded history. And we're one of them.
100 billion.
Right now, 100 billion people. And we're all connected. So I love that thought that we're all connected. And I think to the extent that we all are open, we got plenty of differences.
Yeah.
We could spend a lot of time talking about all our differences, but the one thing that we can speak about with a level of certainty, is that we're all connected. So I would leave everybody with that thought.
Well, I think that's a mic drop, because I think that's something the world could certainly use right now, that mentality. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure you'll be back again sometime.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good deal.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching and tuning in to How to Make Money with Hard Money. Please like, subscribe, and follow DKC Lending on all social media platforms.